Hello and welcome to another episode. This is Attention Gaming Disorder. This is Stiff Shots, episode 2. Today I'm going to be talking about something that used to be near and dear to me. A lot of times it still is, and that's Survivor Series. So I'm going to be reviewing, kind of remembering a lot of the old Survivor Series. And I have the backdrop of my old-timey wrestlers up here again because this is when I really enjoyed it, and this is when I thought Survivor Series was thriving. So I'm just gonna go through a lot of the little bit of history of it. I'm not gonna go through everything because I feel the product got really bad after a while, and I know there was a time when we actually got this new thing called Elimination Chamber, and that hasn't been back for a long time. Can't ask these guys to kill themselves, but we'll just kind of go through a few of these things, and I'll put up some old images. You'll probably be like, oh, this guy just loves this one wrestler, and maybe that's true, but you know, I like them all. It's just one wrestler kind of stands out more than the rest as far as how good they were at Survivor Series. Okay, so Survivor Series really started out in '87. It used to be these elimination tag team matches, and that's kind of when I first started doing it. So I was born in '84, so I was about 3 years old in '87, so I don't have great memories of anything like that. But I do remember going, my grandma loved wrestling, and I do remember going over on Thanksgiving or around Thanksgiving, always seeing my grandma, and we'd be eating Thanksgiving dinner, and that night we'd be watching Survivor Series. So it became really cool because unlike all the rest of the matches, all the rest of the things that we got to see the rest of the year, these were elimination matches. Elimination matches were a little bit different. So I think when it first started out, it was 3-on-3. And you had to eliminate each of the three people. So in '87, they had some co-main events. I think they had 5-on-5 matches at one time too. But you'd have a couple guys fighting each other, and there might be 3-on-1 at one time. It'd be tag matches, so it would be brawling style. But it'd be really kind of cool that you had to eliminate everybody, and you could be the sole survivor, or you could come back and have a really cohesive team and beat the crap out of everybody. It's really good for storylines. And by the time it came out, there wasn't that many pay-per-views that would come out. So this was kind of special. And a little bit later, you had the big four. You had WrestleMania, you had Survivor Series, you had SummerSlam, which became huge, and you had Royal Rumble, which later became huge. I actually hold that there's only a couple really good Royal Rumble matches, the best one being in '92, but you had Survivor Series, and I always thought Survivor Series was really solid. So, throughout the year you had SummerSlam, which was kind of midway throughout the year, and you'd have these huge main events, really kind of cool. Not a lot of gimmicks. This Royal Rumble would have, of course, the Royal Rumble match, which could be hit or miss, as we would see throughout the years. I think there has been a good one in quite a while. WrestleMania was the big event. That's where you have a lot of things going on. But Survivor Series was, you would see most of the wrestlers. And to me, that was cool because back then, you wouldn't get to see most of these wrestlers. You would see Sunday morning superstars. There wasn't a Raw back then when I was watching this stuff. You had maybe Saturday night main event, but you really didn't have a consistent, I get to see everybody. So Survivor Series was a big treat because you had 4-on-4, 5-on-5 matches, and you got to see tons of these wrestlers that you would never get to see that often. And so it was pretty awesome, and a whole family would sit around, we'd watch these things. You'd have really cool matches. I think a 5-on-5 at '87 was Andre, One Man Gang, King Kong Bundy, Bud Rich, and Rick Rude. So you had some great heels in there. Of course, the big attraction of Andre, and you had him against Hogan, Orndorff, Don Morocco, Ken Patera, and Bam Bam, who had just switched again. Bam Bam worked for a long time. People don't really realize that. Bam Bam worked heel, he worked face. He headlined a WrestleMania at one time. So really great wrestler. great big man. I met him. He's a great guy. But you had these matches like that, and you had to eliminate every single one of these guys, and it was cool. It was just really cool to me. Um, First one I kind of remember was in '89, and I think that was uh, a really cool Survivor Series. You had, I think the Honky Tonk Man was there, Dusty Rhodes. You had, let's see, I'm trying to think. You had Ultimate Warrior, Shawn Michaels, Marty Jannetty, and Jim Neidhart. Um, and then you had Bobby Heenan in there, which was Andre and Haku, who some of y'all probably know as Ming, but Haku was crazy. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, and it was like these five versus these five. It was a really kind of cool match. Um, I think we also had the Hulkamaniacs versus the Million Dollar Team. I remember the cool thing was Randy Savage was on there, and it was like Randy Savage, the Canadian Earthquake, Dino Bravo, and Greg Valentine. Jimmy Hart was out there, Sherry Martel. So Randy Savage was King's Macho King at the time. He had Queen Sherry, and you had him against Jim Duggan, Bret Hart, Rodney Garvin, and Hercules, the 4x4s. So, and I think the King's Court won that time. I mean, you just had some really cool matches. The Ultimate Warriors, which was the Ultimate Warrior team, I know they defeated the Bobby Heenan team with Haku and everything. But even back then, I was like, how come Haku's not winning or something like that? It was just, they were just really kind of cool. I got to see everybody fight. And particularly in that match, I think the Ultimate Warrior was the only one that was left. I know Andre went out by just being out of the ring, so that was kind of crappy. But you had Neidhart go out, you had Jannetty go out real quick, you had Kaku. That's when Shawn Michaels had this real kind of, he had a finisher before the Sweet Chin Music, which I always just know in some martial arts. I know Sweet Chin Music's a weak finisher to me when I see it. I wish he would have kept this other one, which was like this really cool suplex kind of thing. It was like a teardrop suplex. Nobody does that anymore. But I digress. I think he beat Haku with a flying crossbody. But you had Shawn Michaels go out. I think you had Arn Anderson. Bobby Heenan was in there. And I think Bobby Heenan even went in the ring in Ultimate Warrior. I think that was the spot. Ultimate Warrior, like, grabbed Bobby Heenan and beat him, which was really cool because if you know the history, Bobby Heenan was with Rick Rude, and Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude put on really good matches. I know a lot of people talk crap about Ultimate Warrior, but he put on a really good match with Rick Rude at one time, and I think they put Heenan in like a monkey suit or something at the end. It was kind of funny after he knocked him out. So that was one of the earliest Survivor Series that I remember. Wasn't the best Survivor Series by any means. Subsequent ones I thought were just great. Particularly, so these are all kind of running until 94, and I'm from San Antonio, and I got to actually go to the 94 one. But I think 92 really stands out in my mind because I think I was 8 years old, and I was at my grandma's, and so you're getting a little bit older. My mom and my sister she was in Girl Scouts. They went to some ranch or something. So I was stuck there, and my grandma was like, we're getting a Survivor Series. And I was like, okay. And it was just 92. So I just remember really getting into how wrestling worked. And I got to see my favorite wrestler because they had built him up. Can you imagine building up somebody over the storyline? It was Bret. And he was fighting Shawn, and Shawn was just a perfect heel. I always loved Shawn as a heel back then because he was just so arrogant, so cocky, which is why I think once he won a title and went face and everything, it kind of ruined his character. Even when he tried to go back to heel later, it just never seemed to fit. He always was good being a chaser. He never had a really good run with the title. Business was always low, and he had the title, and he's just... He was a good wrestler, but he was never, I don't know, he just never had it as far as like he could run with the belt or anything. But I remember in that match, I remember Bret and Shawn put on this really good match in the main event, and Bret ends up sticking him in the sharpshooter at the end, and Shawn like taps out. It was just a great match, and I just remember that when I was young, and I had my Hitman glasses and everything. And I was like, yeah. I think Macho Man and Mr. Perfect fought that time. I think they were fighting Ric Flair and Razor Ramon when Razor Ramon was a heel, which was really cool. And it was good to see Macho Man, Mr. Perfect wrestling. It was always good to see those two guys wrestling. They're just great wrestlers. Flair was a good conditioned athlete. I don't think he was a great wrestler. Ramon, Scott Hall he was hot. He came in that company hot. What was he? Did Diamond Stud before, but he came in that company really hot. That's where we got to see the Undertaker in another casket match. I don't even think they called it a casket match back then. I think he was fighting Kamala. So I really enjoyed that Survivor Series. I thought it was really cool. It was really fun. But like I said, that one was one of the ones I remember. What kind of sucks about it is it only had, I think, one traditional match. How I like those traditional 4-on-4 Survivor Series matches. And I think it was like the Nasty Boys and the Natural Disasters. So Earthquake and Typhoon. So John Tenta, who's just a great wrestler. Earthquake was just so believable. I wish he would have got a run with the main title. And that's when they actually, I think that's when they turned face for a while. It was interesting. But I know they went up against Money Inc., which was IRS and Ted DiBiase, Erwin R. Shyster and Ted DiBiase, Million Rand, and the Beverly Brothers. The Genius was out there, which was Laney Poffo, Macho Man's brother. So all in all, I remember that sticking out to me right away. So 92 was a really cool year for me. Then I think we had, in 93, we had that, I think I have an image on there of Lex and Bulldog, Lex and the Steiners, and who else is in there? Tatanka? That's what Tatanka, you gotta understand, Tatanka, and people look back on Tatanka and they're like, whatever, Tatanka. Tatanka came in that company hot. He rode this really, really long win streak. He was just, he was on fire. And it was just kind of cool to see this guy come in and just dominate, and he had a really cool gimmick, and he was a face, and as a young kid you liked the faces. I think that was the year Razor Ramon was now a face. Macho Man was still wrestling. There was a really cool wrestler I loved, which was Adam Bomb, but I think they lost right away. They never really built up Adam Bomb that well. He had a small little window of trying to be cool, but I actually liked him. You had the Heavenly Bodies that year. You had the Rock and Roll Express. I remember the Bushwhackers were out there with Men on a Mission. Bam Bam Bigelow. Bastion Booger was in that. Yeah, Bastion Booger was in that. And the Head Shrinkers, Samu and Fatu. Because Bastion Booger was just this really crazy looking wrestler. It was kind of weird that year because the main event wasn't. That's when I started really understanding. Like when I remember watching SummerSlams and I was like, see Bret and Perfect fight, and I'd be like, that's the best match. Or Bret and Bulldog, and which went on last. But sometime around right then, I started realizing, hey, the best match doesn't always go on last. And, kind of being a young guy, I didn't know what was going on. But that was a pretty cool year because you had these two matches I was kind of invested in, which was the Hart family. It was Bret, Owen, Bruce, and Keith. And it was and Stu Hart was out there, so you had all these Harts. And Shawn Michaels was out there. And I was like, oh, Shawn Michaels can have all these cool guys. And he had these guys, I didn't even know. I still don't know who they are. I guess I could figure it out one day, but I don't know who they are. It was the Red Knight, the Blue Knight, and the Black Knight. And this was because Jerry Lawler didn't want to watch wrestle him. This was kind of when Jerry Lawler came in, and everyone just kind of called him Burger King. So after Hart had to give up the title, and he went through King of the Ring that year, and just solidified himself as the greatest wrestler in the world by wrestling 3 different complete matches. But Jerry Lawler attacked him after that, and it just became this year of the guy doesn't have the title, but he's still, the whole company's around him. Yokozuna has the title. Yokozuna is the one that they have here. Yokozuna is the guy. And this is what I've really started understanding that slow build, the storyline of it. And we still only had like these 4, well, actually that year, 5 pay-per-views. We had King of the Ring that year. And it was just like the year of Bret to me. It was like the pay-per-view. But I mean, Yoko was in there. They were trying to build Lex Luger that year. But anyway, they had this Hart family match. And the cool thing about this was the match was the Harts were just outclassing these guys, just beating the crap out of them. And Owen, in particular, was looking great. And there was a spot in the match where Bret has been worked over quite a bit, and he's on the ring apron. He's kind of tired, and Owen gets flung into the side by Shawn Michaels, and Owen hits Bret and turns around, and Shawn Michaels like rolls him up, pins him, and Owen gets eliminated. Then the Harts beat Shawn, and they beat everybody on the team. And you know, the thing is, it's like three Harts left, 1 got eliminated, and Owen's really pissed about it. He's like, hey, that's not my fault. I should be out there. And it just started building this deep, slow burn of dissent in the Hart family, and Owen and Bret eventually going to fight. And it eventually went into a Royal Rumble where they had a tag team match, and Bret's knee kind of was going out. And Owen, they lost the match, and then Owen like beats him when he's down. Bret comes back later at the Royal Rumble, and they do like this perfect finish with him and Lex, which we'll get into another episode one time. And it's kind of funny because they did a AJ Styles, and who was AJ Styles going up against here recently? Oh, Luke Harper, and they were trying to flip out of the ring at the same time and land to where you couldn't tell who feet hit it first, but you could tell that time. This time they tried to like cover up with a camera, but they shouldn't because both guys' feet hit the same time at exactly the same time. They did it perfect. It was like a perfect spot, and testament to both guys on it. But that was a slow burn here because this match set up that Royal Rumble, which set up, you know, who are we going to pick, Lex or Bret? And Bret and Owen fought at WrestleMania. Then, you know, the next year you have greatest cage match I've ever seen in my life with Bret and Owen. So it just really was building this one storyline, and that's when they did it very, very well. And I was extremely impressed by them back then. The other match you had on the card, the main event, I guess, was the All-Americans, Lex, Undertaker, Steiners, against the foreign guys. So you had Yokozuna and Crush, and Ludwig Borga, and I think you had another guy, but I don't remember him. I remember that's the first time I remember seeing Johnny Polo. I think Jock is out there of the what do they call them? Not the Mounties, yeah, the Mountie. I'm the Mountie. So Jacques Rougeau, one of the Rougeau brothers. And I remember Johnny Polo being out there, Mr. Fuji, Jim Cornette, Paul Bearer. You had this cool thing where they were doing vignettes for this, and Undertaker opens up his jacket and it has like the American flag. It looked pretty cool. But Johnny Polo was Raven, and I remember when I first saw him as Raven, I was like, Johnny Polo, and I kept just saying Johnny Polo all the time, which was kind of weird. So it was a really good Survivor Series. Getting into 94, 94 was in San Antonio, so I remember being there, and the gimmick was Chuck Norris was out in the main event, and Chuck Norris was in the aisle, and in the aisle, Chuck Norris was like gonna stop the $1 Million, what were they called, Money Incorporated, or the $1 Million Team, and because Undertaker was fighting Yokozuna, and I think $1 Million Man had all these people out there. Was it? I think that's what it was. I think he had all these people. It was kind of hard to see from where I was sitting. I had my Bret sunglasses on there to see the Bob Backlund Bret Hart match, the towel match, which Owen just healed it up really big time there, and cost Bret the title. British Bulldog went out, and the mom ends up throwing in the title. And then you had the Royal Family. It was like Jerry Lawler, and he had these small wrestlers. I don't want to say like what people used to say back then, but you know, they were like dwarves. And then Doink had Doink, Dink, Pink, Wink, Stink, Bink. He had all these little doinks, and they were just fighting. I remember liking it when I was young. It's you know, Doink was a good worker when he was a heel, but now I don't really think that's that good. But I know you had the bad guys and the Teamsters, and you had Razor Ramon against and a 1-2-3 Kid, British Bulldog, Fatu, Sion, You had Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Owen, Jim, Neidhart, and Jeff Jarrett, and it was like the bad guys versus the Teamsters. And I remember that one was, um, that was an interesting match. I thought it was a good match. I love Bret, but I don't think that Bret and Backlund match was that great because there was just a lot of, he had him in the crossface chicken wing for like most of the match, it seemed like, and then they threw the towel in. It was like a slow build, but they could have got there a little bit quicker. I'm sure it was better on television in the audience. It was kind of like slow pacing, um, but I remember because I remember I would always tape the things even if I would go to the show and watch them back, but because you get different crowd reactions. But I remember that Survivor Series match with the Teamsters versus the bad guys, and it was like everyone got eliminated. The British Bulldog was my favorite guy in the match, or him and Owen, honestly. But British Bulldog got knocked out. He was counted out. Everyone else was. This was like Diesel running amok here. Diesel jackknife powerbomb Fatu. He's out. 1-2-3 Kid. He's out. Sion. He's out. British Bulldog. He got knocked out of the ring by Diesel and got counted out. And then I think Sean tagged in and was trying to get Diesel to hold Ramon while he super kicked him. And Ramon moves and he kicks Diesel in the head. Diesel goes nuts. And he tries to beat the crap out of Sean and he chases him outside the ring. And everyone tries to stop him. And they count out the whole team. And Razor Ramon wins and does his like doom doom ch doom 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 ch doom 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 dun. You know, they play his music. I think Lawler actually won against the Doinks, which was weird. And there was another match on there that was really cool. The $1 Million Team versus, it was like Luger, Mabel, Adam Bomb, Billy, and Bart Gunn. Again, I loved Adam Bomb. I don't know why I liked Adam Bomb. I think he just had this cool kind of look to him. But that's when you had Bam Bam in the $1 Million Team. It was like King Kong Bundy. Tatanka had switched sides. He had sold out, which was really cool. Earlier, you had Bam Bam, Tom Pritchard. Ted DiBiase wasn't wrestling. I didn't know back then, but I guess his back was really hurt. And I remember that's the time you had Bam Bam like doing moonsaults, and I was like freaking out because this giant guy was doing these moonsaults. I think in the end we had Tatanka and Lex Luger. It was Tatanka, Bam Bam, King Kong Bundy, and Lex Luger, Billy and Bart, and Bart and Billy got eliminated. Then we had Lex versus Tatanka, which they had been building up their feud. And they blew it off really bad in a cage match with a pin, which was the first time I saw a cage match with a pin later. But I remember Lex beat Tatanka, and then he got beat by King Kong Bundy, like splashed him or something. So like $1 Million Team actually won the thing. But it was a cool show because of the end where Chuck Norris comes in and like was like kicking all the $1 Million Team and kept kicking them and kicking them and kicking them. It was a casket match. But I remember Norris just kept beating the crap out of everybody. But I remember IRS, Erwin R. Shyster, Rotunda guy, who's Bray Wyatt's dad, and, what's the other guy's name? The guy with the Miz now. What is his name? I always forget. Bo Dallas. He's the dad. So IRS is over there, and he sneaks around the other side of the ring, and he attacks the Undertaker, and then they like shut the thing, and Undertaker gets beat, and so Yokozuna I think keeps the title, and it was kind of like, God damn it, because we really wanted the Undertaker to win, but I think Smoke came out. That's when you had the Undertaker go away, and then you had he was gone for a long time, and you had the fake Undertaker come out in a couple of months. He was the corporate one that the $1 Million Man owned, and then I think at SummerSlam you had Undertaker versus the Undertaker, and he went from wearing his gray, which he used to wear these gloves, and they were like gray gloves, and he had these little things on his legs, to wearing purple, and that was a switch, and that was like the Leslie Nielsen thing, and somehow that was the Undertaker versus the Undertaker was the main event, not Bret and Owen in a cage match for the title the next year. It was a gimmick match at a SummerSlam, which was always kind of weird to me. because that cage match was just great. I'm trying to think. The next year in '95, I think you had Bret and Diesel in the main event. Now, there was all these other matches that year, and I think I don't know how long I'm running here because it's probably running for a while right now. But you had Bret and Diesel in the main event, which was a badass main event, but we'll get there in a second. Again, I always like those 4-on-4 Survivor Series matches, and you had Public Enemy in there. That's the first time we had seen for a long time. So I used to get these matches kind of and watch them a lot. I remember we had the Body Donnas. That's when Sonny was like, oh my gosh, Sonny. And they were fighting the underdogs, and they actually beat the underdogs, which is kind of lame because I don't know why Hakushi, who's this great wrestler, who is probably the second best wrestler, if not the best wrestler in that company at the time. I saw him and Bret put these marvelous matches on all the time. But they would, it was kind of insane how they had it that year. And Hakushi was just great wrestler. But I think they ended up losing that year. I remember this might have been the year that they actually just like randomly picked some of the teams, and so I was like, I don't really understand that. You had this women's match, which was kind of cool. The only women's wrestler that anybody knew was Alundra Blaze, but she actually lost to Aja Kong that year, I think, in that elimination match. Then we had the Dark Side, which was Undertaker, Sabio, Fatu, and Henry Godwin, which I loved Henry Godwin and Sabio, so I liked that team. I'm not really sold on Fatu. And they were fighting the Royals, which was King Mabel, Jerry Lawler, his dentist, which was Kane, Isaac Yankem, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Oh my gosh, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And I always hated Triple H. I always will. I think he sucks. I've never seen him put on a great match. Nothing pops in my head. But I think that's the year that Undertaker just like, I'm just going to beat the crap out of all of you. So he beats up Jerry Lawler. He beats up his brother Kane. Isaac Yankem. He beats up Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And then Mabel just runs away. And it was like a clean sweep. The other one we had was, I think Shawn was actually a face at the time. Or was it? I think this was one of those other like flippity-flop matches. Because it was Shawn, Ahmed, British Bulldog, Psycho Sid versus Yoko, Owen, Razor, and Dean Douglas. I remember Razor and Dean Douglas hated each other. Razor didn't want to be on that heel team. And I think Sid was with DiBiase at the time. I don't remember Bulldog being a face at that time either, honestly. But I remember Dean Douglas went out because Razor Ramon just attacked him. Psycho Sid got beat by Razor. Because I think Sid and Shawn were fighting, and then Shawn did the same thing Razor did to Dean Douglas. And then Owen came in the match. Ahmed Johnson probably injured him. But he did that move, the Pearl River Plunge. He was a very unsafe wrestler. He's a big guy, though. I think Razor Ramon went out after that. Bulldog beat him, and then Yokozuna. I think Yokozuna went out after that too, and I think Shawn, Ahmed, and the Bulldog all end up winning that match. And I always liked the Bulldog. I thought he was a really good wrestler. But the big match in this whole thing was Bret versus Diesel, because it was the best match I ever seen Diesel put on. It was for the title. I didn't know who was gonna win, but it was just a hardcore match. It was like a no disqualification match, and we didn't normally see this stuff back then. So you got to understand a young kid being like, "Oh my gosh, what the hell's going on?" I think I was 10 or 11. So there's different spots in this match. Just so many amazing things you never seen before, like the chairs inside the ring being legally used, being driven into a leg. Diesel's a huge guy. And he's just like throwing Bret around. Bret's trying to chop him down. Diesel's just standing tall doing his thing. You can't believe that he could beat this monster. Diesel's a big monster guy. And he didn't have a great run with the title. I don't think he was ready. He wasn't ready until maybe that year. Like then, at that match, he was ready to be cool. And then he went to WCW and became Nash and the Outsiders and everything. But Bret ends up tying him in the match with like a cord, and he tied it too well, and he's beating the crap out of him with things. he was just chopping them down. When Diesel got pissed, he just got pissed and just ripped them up. He couldn't get out of the little cord for a long time. So it was a cool spot to me. I think Bret himself has said he tried it, but it wasn't the best thing ever. And then I remember this cool spot. Before we saw people flying through tables all the time, you saw this table over there. And the table looks different than tables we see now. It just looks like Bret was on the apron. Diesel just flung him into this table from the apron using the ropes and like flung him in there with a lot of force. And Bret just looks like his whole head just imploded through that table and just went through this thing like a brick. And he sold it like he got murdered, like hit by a bus. And he was kind of hurt, but this was the end was really neat. Like, you didn't think that, like, Diesel's now standing tall. You're like, okay, he's about to do the power bomb on him. And Bret just sold these power bombs really well. And what I mean by that is, if you ever saw, like, I guess Diesel and Shawn that past year they had fought in the WrestleMania, it's one of the worst power bombs you ever saw, because Shawn like over rotated and didn't want to land right, almost like he landed on his feet. Maybe to show that he could. It would have been a cooler spot. He landed on his feet, kicked him in the head, got the title then. That would have been kind of cool. Or landed on his feet and Diesel just kicks him anyway. But at this end, like, Diesel's trying to pull him up for the power bomb, and Bret keeps collapsing. And Diesel's like, oh my gosh. So he bends down. Bret rolls him up in a small package and pins him. Diesel gets up and is pissed. They do a lot of these now, but they don't do them that good of ring psychology. So Diesel's pissed off. He's pissed. He's really angry. He starts jackknife powerbombing Bret and throwing referees everywhere. Just a great spot, great ending, and I just love the match. 96. So by this time they're not on Thanksgiving around that time anymore. So I think 96 we have some of these matches. I don't finally remember it. I know Shawn and Psycho Sid end up fighting, and Jose Lothario was out there. I remember that. And Sid ends up beating Shawn, which I was kind of happy about. I thought Sid deserved a run. I also know this is when Bret finally came back after he lost the title to Shawn, and he fought Steve Austin. And I think Steve Austin had won the King of the Ring, but he was still doing the $1 Million Man kind of gimmick where he's the ringmaster. Ends kind of a callback to a WrestleMania, was it 8, where Bret and Piper fought. Piper hadn't been pinned in forever. Hogan never pinned him. And he does like the sleeper hold, and Bret runs up the ropes and flips him over and pins him. This match with Austin it was a nice little match. You'll see their greatest match, maybe the greatest match ever in WrestleMania, not that much longer later. But he does the same kind of spot. He tries to put him $1 Million Dream, Bret flips over and pins him. I remember Savio Vega fighting. And Razor Ramon. I remember Savio Vega was like Razor's friend or something. It was kind of cool. I think they ended in no contest that year. Is why it was kind of hard to remember. So it wasn't. I don't remember it being like the greatest thing ever. But I remember like Bulldog now being a heel. I think what's his face? Leaf Cassidy was there now. Who was the New Rockers were there. He was kind of weird. That's Al Snow. What does everybody want? Okay, then the next year, of course, we have the Montreal Screwjob on my birthday. So my favorite wrestler gets, kicked out on my birthday. And I didn't actually order that one, so I was like watching it on those old squiggly lines and hearing that the Hitman submitted, and I didn't know for a long, long time what really happened, so I watched Wrestling with Shadows. So I just kind of wanted to go through these old matches here. I don't really want to like go into the Montreal Screwjob. We all know what the hell happened. We have a documentary to show us what really happened. It's not really questionable. I think WWE now tries to rewrite that, but we all saw what happened. I mean, it's not that hard to understand anymore. But it sent shockwaves through the business. So I just kind of want to stop right there. There's a ton of other Survivor Series. I felt like they started losing their luster, like right then. That could have been like a key indicator. I think they did something the next year that was like the next Screwjob where The Rock did it or something. He like joined McMahon. Like I said, eventually they brought in the Elimination Chamber, which was kind of cool. but recently it hasn't been that good. I think you had Brock and Goldberg fight each other last year, and it just, I don't know. It just, 10-second match ain't that cool. They haven't put on a good Survivor Series in a while, and there was a time where they were just going to eliminate them. I remember CM Punk and John Cena and Ryback fighting at one time, and that was kind of interesting. I don't think it ended up as good as it should. I remember John Cena and The Rock fighting The Miz and R-Truth. That could have been a lot different. R-Truth got over somehow. I don't think he's that great of a wrestler, but he got over with his heel turn, and that was the whole kind of weird thing going on. I think one of the biggest killers of Survivor Series was when the Nexus came in. And the Nexus was it was like Wade Barrett. I think Daniel Bryan was in there. And they had this really cool like build. But I don't even think that was at Survivor Series, was it? I could be totally mistaken. But I remember they had this really cool build of this Nexus, and John Cena just like kind of destroyed the whole angle, and it was like one of the hottest angles they had ever had coming in, where it was like all these guys had invaded from NXT, and they were gonna come in there. I think that is no, it must have not been that year. It must have been a separate thing. But I remember that anyway, where they like killed the angle because John Cena decided, I'm not going to lose to these guys. And by not doing that, he killed all these angles. There's probably some good ones. If you know of any, just let me know. I'll go back and I'll watch them and just see how they are. But it just seemed like it lost a lot of its luster. I know they started doing these Raw versus SmackDowns because they did brand split Survivor Series matches, and they really build to a storyline, so I didn't understand why they would do them, because the guys would still be on separate shows. It seemed like in the past they would have these multi-man matches where I got to see all these wrestlers. It wasn't oversaturated like it is now, where you have 3 hours of Raw, 2 hours of SmackDown, an hour of 205 Live, NXT, you got a pay-per-view almost every couple weeks. You got the network. It just seems like it's so oversaturated. Back then, it was like, you didn't get to see these guys, but maybe 4 or 5 times a year, and you didn't have Raw too often. And when you did have Raw, it was only like 2 hours, and you wouldn't see everybody. So you really got a nice build, and they just haven't done that since. And I really hate the brand split kind of because of it. Just kind of stupid, unless there's like a gimmick or a point to the brand split on a Survivor Series match where like if you beat this guy, they're traded to your show and you get to go to theirs, or just something silly. That's just off the top of my head. I don't think that's the way to go, but it has to be better than what they've been doing. I think they even tried to rebrand the thing in 2010, which sucks because it was like, man, this used to be like a high-class pay-per-view, and now it's just like an afterthought. Nobody really cares. It's like another thing, and I think that's a misstep. I think this is one of the good ones. I think this is something they can bring back and use to build storylines. But they haven't. Even the tag matches haven't been that good recently. They tried to build them, and they just don't know how. Tag team matches and multi-man matches are great if you can have the proper people, if you build them right. And they just don't seem to do that. They don't focus on it. They'd rather do a battle royal all the time, or do even King of the Ring. I really did King of the Ring, and you should do King of the Ring in one night, one tournament, one night. You could have done that on all these vacated titles in one night. No, they do them over like a long span. They do them on like Raw or something, or they do the entire King of the Ring tournament just on television. It's like, that's not special. They got to make it feel special again. They just haven't done that for a long time. Anyway, here's to hoping Survivor Series gets back to its former glory. I hope one day that it can. You never really know what they're gonna do. But just looking back at some of these old things that I used to love, I kind of hope that they pull their head out of their ass again and can get back to it the way it used to be. Maybe it won't be as bad as it used to be. But that's kind of right there where it died. You can see the image right there. That's when it was still cool. So, until next time, this has been Attention Gaming Disorder, remembering Survivor Series here on Stiff Shots.